Hello, everyone, and welcome to EUphoria. It is TTRP Girls Month, where we are celebrating a month full of girls, women, and people who identify in all the beautiful intersectionality of womanhood. And I am here going to be interviewing this really cool person. We're going to have a cool chat about womanhood, feminism, TTRPGs, D&D, and we're going to solve it all within this interview, this chat. It'll be amazing. It'll be wonderful. If you want more of this sort of content, by all means, please continue checking out the channel for the rest of the month and every other month of the year. We are here to uplift TTRPG creatives, particularly those in the European community, because the center of the TTRPG universe is not just in the US. There is amazing talent, diverse individuals that are here on this side of the ocean as well. My name is Aida. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Latina queer woman of color. I have tan skin, dark eyes. My hair is behaving. It is wavy. I am wearing a very pink, fluffy sweater. Friend, who are you?
Hi, I'm Lyssa from the Slovenly Trails podcast. She, her pronouns. I am brown haired. My hair is way too long, actually. It goes past my shoulders. I should be cutting it soon because I don't like long hair. Wearing a bright blue shirt for solidarity with Finland, where I am from, and black glasses, headset.
Awesome. Amazing. So, everyone, meet Lyssa, who is officially my new BFF friend, or at least for the next hour. And Lyssa is an intersectional feminist TTRPG researcher and podcast host interested in the history of the industry and the problematic origins that it stems from, especially within D&D. She's a graphic designer by day, a bisexual chaos goblin for her home games, and any sporadic actual plays at night. I get you, I feel you. As you said, made in Finland and brought up a broad identity somewhere in between.
That's me.
That is you. And I was looking through your podcast library. I was trying to squeeze in a few episodes, and um, I felt pride and I
Mm-hmm.
felt rage. And then I felt a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more rage and I felt
Okay.
understanding. And then
Mm-hmm.
I felt I wanted to change everything and I don't know where to start.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's typically what you feel when you listen to one episode of the Slovenly Trolls podcast. You get very confused. Sometimes you don't know where it comes from, and then you just kind of rage. And for anyone who's feminine presenting or female or like identifies or empathizes with women or any femme people, it's some of the content about us written in old D&D is just bad,
Bad.
bad,
It's bad.
sexist. It's sexist, and that's how actually this podcast started, was because we saw a one tweet, and then we got really mad, and then we started a podcast. So here we are 3 years later.
I will say I am familiar with those origins all the way up to Gygax, kind of
Mm, hmm.
the way it was codified in the game.
Yeah.
And to be slightly diplomatic, the Wizards of the Coast disclaimer for legacy content does say
Yes.
that in
Yes.
regards to
Hmm.
these clearly sexist depictions of women,
Hmm.
these depictions were wrong then and are wrong today. This content, so referring to any legacy content, which it's not just sexism, but whew, this content is presented as it was originally created, because to do so otherwise would be the same as claiming these prejudices never existed. End quote.
Hmm.
So that is the
Hmm.
disclaimer that they need to give. I recognize that the TTRPG industry, WotC, the world, us, you and
Hmm.
me, we've inherited a lot of things that were bad in the past
Yes.
and continue to be bad today.
Yes.
They're not all necessarily fixed. They're really ingrained. We still haven't awakened to a lot of it,
Mm, hmm.
but I feel it's gotten better. Even in the last, when did COVID start? When we really started digging into TTRPGs more than usual. We've been there for quite some
2020.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ish.
it's
Mm.
been getting better, but there's still that feeling of TTRPGs, or people tend to just boil it down to D&D, of
Mm.
being that
Hmm.
white cis older man
Hmm.
playing in these kind of closed sections.
Hmm.
Uh, if I didn't know anything about it, maybe would still have that impression. Do you feel
Mhm.
that's a common impression that's still kind of prevalent today, or is it better? Please be hopeful. I don't know.
Uh, I mean, I guess it depends on where you're seeing the industry. If you go to a comic book shop in the middle of nowhere, the likelihood of seeing women there, depending on where you are, any kind of other ethnic minority other than a white person, is might be really low. But for the benefit of the doubt, there's more and more intersectional and like representation diversity being seen, I think, within the community, especially as we joined social media as a podcast, and we've been seeing way more diversity, representation, inclusivity, and also white people supporting like diversity and inclusivity, and like shouting out BIPOC creators and all of these other creators who are marginalized, who otherwise wouldn't necessarily be like being shown in the kind of mainstream of TTRPGs, because as for whatever reason, every white guy has a podcast, and it seems to be a D&D podcast at the moment, and there's a lot of them. So, like I try to keep my podcast listening to people who do not identify as white. So to actually like support people who diversify this industry.
I absolutely hear you. From an actual play point of view, there are a lot of dude friends who are all cishet white guys
Mhm.
playing usually D&D, and
Mhm.
I have a lot of cis white dudes that are genuine good beings, good allies,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of them. And as I was sharing briefly before with you before the call, it was usually just me and them.
Yeah.
And after a while, I got kind of like, oh, I guess this is normal because, like you said, when I do go into the friendly local gaming store,
Mm.
I pretty much am the only woman or femme
Mhm.
presenting person, except the spouse or girlfriend that got lost by the Pokemon plushie section.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the one usually asking. I'm like, "Hi, do you have free league alien dice? I kind
Yeah.
of need like what what is that for your boyfriend? No, it's for
No, that's for
me.
me. Mm, mhm. I
Oh,
I I hear you.
oh,
Yeah.
do you play the priest? No, I'm the GM. Kind of situation.
And then you watch them, like, try to, like, logic it through, like, "You're the GM, but you're a girl or friend presenting. That doesn't make any sense." And then you just stand there, like, waiting for them to, like, click it into place.
Exactly like that. And for a while, I thought that was kind of normal and like, okay, I'll have thick skin and move on. But then I had the wonderful experience 5, 6 years ago now. I got to play at an actual play online
Mhm,
with an all femme table, all women and femme table,
mhm.
included trans women, women of color, queer
Amazing.
women, and I couldn't go back.
Yeah.
I could not go back.
Yeah.
Have you had a similar experience? What your awakening to like, or was it this tweet that was the impetus of it all?
So I've seeing as I have a podcast where I rage about, cishet white men and what they've done to D&D and TTRPGs, I actually have mostly good experiences playing D&D. I joined a table in, I believe it was 2018 or 2019, so right before the pandemic hit. No, well, not really, couple of years before the pandemic hit,
What
and
is time?
yeah, what is time? The COVID didn't even count. Those are like 2 years that I don't even add to my age, or include in my age. I joined not 1, but 2 groups of all femme presenting D&D players, some of
Cool.
who identify as queer, some of who go by they them pronouns. But it's been, I think, the best introduction I could have had ever to D&D, because it in a way it also created this podcast because of, I think, some of the topics that we were playing with. Because when you play with people who are in some way or shape or form like you tend to play like in a way that's comfortable for you, in a way that like you can open up in. They say D&D isn't isn't therapy, but you can use it to explore parts of yourself. I identified as a bisexual after playing my first bisexual tiefling character. Shocking. Shocking, I know. Bisexual
Tieflings.
tieflings, I know.
Tieflings.
I am like the stereotype. But like you there's this inherent like way to explore who you are, and when it comes in a safe environment, in a safe space, you feel you feel good enough to and safe enough to and comfortable enough to kind of open up to these people and to explore facets of your personality, which I find really fascinating. And you wouldn't do that if you were at a table where you don't necessarily know that if I make a joke about like a cishet white man and I'm with a white man who would get angry at me, I can't make that joke.
Hmm,
Or
hmm.
if you come from like a minority background, you can't make those jokes about like your cultural background. You can't make those jokes, and there's not kind of like that comfortable connection there. I'm not saying that you should always play with people who are you're comfortable with. Obviously, like diversify who you play with. But when you are playing D&D and you want to explore facets of like who you are, I would do so in a safe and comfortable environment, and then that allows you to kind of figure out how your story, how your character combines and what facets of your character are maybe parts of you or but keeping it safe and knowing that you are not your character and your character is kind of you but also a small part of you.
That very thin
The
line.
very thin line of like it's me but also it's separate, so if something bad happens to them, it's not me that has happened.
But the like you said, there's that dynamic where you understand or you sort of get to know because of those shared experiences, you
Hmm.
get to see where that comfort level is and how that's
Yeah.
received. So
Hmm.
even when I play in tables with close friends, and I'm in the Netherlands, so
Hmm.
there aren't me, so I'm usually the only woman or POC. And when I get to know my friends like really closely, I will make that joke that is very ethnically or racially tinged because I get to make it. And
Yeah.
everyone gets to make the uncomfortable face, and I'm like, haha.
Yeah.
But when I make that joke at a table with other POC friends that I know very
Hmm.
well, the
Hmm.
face is like, ah, ha,
Yeah.
ha.
Yeah.
So even though both were safe spaces, the
Mm.
dynamic completely changes and the conversation gets to change.
Yeah.
In the former, it's me going afterwards, having a deep, meaningful, heartfelt, like, this is what it's like. And this is how I may have felt in that moment. And my kind, loving, allied white friends going, thank you, we hear you. And they didn't talk, they listened earnestly and they did all the good things and right things. But the latter dynamic is I don't need to talk. We just kind of look at each
Yeah.
other and we
Mhm.
know. It's like being at the
Mhm.
same table full of women and femme presenting people. It's like, I don't need to talk about, explain to you what necessarily usually what
Mhm.
vanity sizing is,
Yeah.
what pressures about our physical bodies is, what our expectations are. You just kind of look at it like, conversation done.
Yeah. I mean, because there's an inherent difference in trying to explain, and through like a joke about like, oh yes, I'm this player at this table, and they can be like, yes, we acknowledge that, but like they have nothing to add to that
Hmm.
other. But when you play with people who know and have the lived experience of what you're talking about, that's an entirely that's sharing a moment with those people, and they can also add to that because what D&D and TTRPGs is storytelling, and it's community storytelling. When you have that kind of community that you have that kind of connection with, you just bring out those facets of that community that you're representing or talking about, and you're having this moment with them. And I just think it's really beautiful that it's like this shared experience and then this moment of like handling whatever it is that you're talking about or making a joke about something that and everybody's comfortable in that space to talk about that
Or comfortably uncomfortable
comfortably uncomfortably. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
willing to have the conversation. And sometimes those are good learning experiences,
Yeah.
goes good teaching ones as well. But whether you're a POC or a marginalized gender, unrepresented gender,
Hmm.
sometimes being the sole or one of the few representatives
Hmm.
and the teacher role can be exhausting.
It's a lot of work to represent who you are and who you identify as, and it's no easy task, even though uh there could be everybody at the table could be trying really hard to like accommodate you and whatever, but like it's really hard to be the only one in the room to represent whatever you identify as, or whatever personality you are, or whatever it is that like you want to showcase to the world and be like, this is me, this is who I am, and you are have to deal with it.
Absolutely. And I really love how that role play element lets you kind of, if we cannot say these things as comfortably or as safely in the real world, because real
Mm,
world dumpster fire,
yeah,
TM, um,
yeah.
I could be a tiefling with high charisma, with cantrips, with magic, with sway, with
Hmm.
uh, ownership if in my own presence as that character to change that fantasy world.
Hmm.
The the bad monarch who does all the things we could dislike that happens in the
Hmm.
real world
Hmm.
can actually get taken down a peg.
Yeah.
Feels very empowering.
It is, and like go back to the thing that I keep going back to. The way that D&D was built is that, and TTRPGs, I think in general, where they started from, basically with D&D and what we've researched into, is that you are the hero of your own story, and being the hero of your own story, that's super empowering. And when there's like a group of people, then that's like a way to empower yourself and the people you're playing with. So if that's a community of people that are like-minded or different, and seeing how that well delves together, because I think cishet white men have had that moment in the sun for like 20-ish years.
We still
That
do.
no I'm not saying that there was never a woman at any table. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there were minorities who played at their tables, but the majority of them were cishet white men. So they've had their stories being told for ages, whether it's been and it's like delved into modern day now, and they still have their stories being told. But I think what's missing is like the other side, the gender minorities, the disabled people, the ones who haven't had that representation in D&D and in TTRPGs. And I think it's important to also tell those stories.
But let's move on to that topic specifically then, because we talked about um, that being at a table with people that you can better identify with,
Hmm.
especially as those that are underrepresented, is a good thing for those people as well.
Hmm.
But okay, cishet white men who roll their eyes at any other side of inclusion, we're going to do you a favor and try to convince you. We don't have to convince you, we're just going to state why this representation is good for you, them as well.
Hmm.
Why could that be?
Why could representation of other gender minorities and other minorities be a good thing for them?
Yeah, and when you say it aloud, I'm like in my head, it's like, of course. But sometimes you have to spell it
I
out.
mean, okay, so let's think about like what shall we think about? Let's think about fantasy literature right
Mm-hmm.
now. In general, we have an idea of what a dragon looks like. We have an
Yeah.
idea of what where a typical D&D game starts in, which is uh a medieval setting, probably western. You meet at a
Tolkien.
tavern.
Yeah.
Tolkien based. Elves look like Tolkien elves. Halflings are hobbits because they were basically stolen from Lord of the Rings, even though Gary Gygax says he hates Lord of the Rings, but he uses it as a marketing tactic. And I will have a whole thing about that. But so we've been playing that scenario in so many TTRPGs, but we're supposed to be playing fantastical things. Where's the fantasy in running through and playing the same thing over and over and over again? Where like it's always in the Middle Ages. It's always in a Western setting. It's always with elves that are from Tolkien. It's always with blah 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 blah. We've been there, done that. What new can we talk about? What new stories can we tell? Can we talk about ethnic minorities? Can we talk about the struggles of disabled people or being disabled? And D&D and TTRPGs is a way for people to play something that's out of their comfort zone if they want to. if you are in a safe environment, you can try and play a character who is not you, who does not identify as you. I wouldn't say necessarily go on a stream and publicize whatever you're playing and testing out.
Oh, they've
But
done that. Please stop doing that, people.
yeah, don't do that. But in a safe home environment, test out how does it feel to be this kind of a person, to be prejudiced against, to be biased against, to have the glass ceiling hold you down because you're not able to do whatever it is that your character wants to do. And then to have that moment of heroism and be like, I want, but why is this working against me? And then fight the system and then take down the system and have that heroic moment to realize, oh, I can apply this to the real world. The people who are like this have these kinds of struggles I can empathize with. And you can, like, it's so much more better storytelling because there's different facets that we're playing with that are not just like medieval elves and Tolkien. And also, you can use it as if you are brave enough to play as somebody to try out something new, then you can actually like learn something that is a struggle for someone else. And I think that's the beauty of TTRPGs is like applying yourself and having and being that character who goes through those kinds of struggles in a contained environment, and then getting like that empathy and that experience of, oh, this is why this is fucked.
That is beautifully said. And if I didn't know exactly what our equipment means to us, I'd say if you have a mic, drop it, but we cannot.
Yeah. I this needs to stay on so I can keep podcasting, but
I absolutely hear you. That was all perfectly beautifully said. So it not just creates opportunities for better stories.
yeah.
Like, can I we've done the dragon, we've 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 done that. Can I
Yeah.
interest you in cryptids from South America, from
Yeah.
Africa, from
Mhm.
Southeast Asia?
Mhm.
Can I interest you in, heck, even just go Eastern European
Mhm.
mythology? Can I
Mhm.
interest you in different forms of magic in the Caribbean and Central America? Can
Mhm.
I interest
Mhm.
you in other forms of deities or
Mhm.
warfare logic? Can I interest you in Ridley's Alien sci-fi, where
Exactly.
you're not we're not fighting dragons, we're fighting the system. Now that you've learned to see that the system is bad,
Mm. Mhm.
and Alien doesn't care what Xenomorph doesn't care what gender you are. You're
Yeah.
gonna be crunchy either way.
Yeah. Exactly.
Even Alien does like these really ridiculous, horrifying things that kind of like uh, turns the gender model on the side. The way it hunts and,
Mhm.
spoiler, incubates its
Mhm.
hosts, unwilling hosts.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this is cool.
Absolutely.
You like all this stuff, right? So
Yeah.
try out other things, and
Yeah.
you can really, I feel that perspective is better had when you invite a different set of people to your table,
Mhm.
when you go out of your way to hear their stories, buy their stories, support their
Mhm.
stories,
Mhm.
as a lot of other creators do. And even D&D is understanding, not D&D, not just specific D&D, but other big TTRPG brands are understanding the power that representation from other cultures can make our stories richer.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with Radiant Citadel?
Yes. I haven't played it yet, but I am familiar with what it is. Yeah.
For those unfamiliar, it's one of their later books, I think even last year, the year before it came out.
Yeah, it's
And
quite recent.
it is a recent anthology of adventures written by, and I think, all POC writing staff with
Mhm.
and there's stories that take place in the fantasy version of Central America, Mexico.
Mhm.
There are adventures that take place in the fantasy version of Sub-Saharan Africa, the fantasy version of Southeast Asia, with those mythologies and those local lores brought in.
Mhm.
And D&D facilitates this as a center place where you are kind of traveling to these different universes. We've made Marvel Universe for you. You like that, right?
Mhm.
White men like Marvel Universe. There you go. We've done it. You're welcome. Uh, Paizo's Pathfinder is also doing that as well,
Mhm.
moving out to different regions. Radiant Citadel won a heck of a ton of awards. Annie's or Diana Joan awards. Paizo, the expansion that went to the Fantasy East Asia, also won a heck ton of awards too. So these are good mechanical games. And that's not to say of the dozens of hundreds of thousands of indie TTRPGs that also focus on non-Eurocentric or have the hero or the main protagonist be ideas that aren't just tied to
Mhm.
gender.
Mhm. I would go on to say that just because you want diversity, if you do not identify with a culture and you don't do not know that culture, you don't have a consultant that's working who comes from some culture. I understand that you, as somebody from the West, can identify and really like anime and Japanese culture and be inspired by it. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's your story to tell in case of I want to make content to bring this culture into the space.
Yeah.
Tell your stories, not other people's stories. And like the question that I think that people should ask themselves is when they want to do something to bring out like a culture or something along these lines. Am I the best person to be telling this story? Because you could just look at AD&D, which is Dungeons and Dragons like 1.0 version.
Mm.
Yeah, we had a lot of like cultures. There was like if even the Finnish pantheon, for whatever fucking reason, turned up in AD&D. I don't know why it's there. I'm very confused. But now it's still in D&D today in 5e because of whatever they fucked around with and found out in AD&D, and they've completely changed some of the Finnish pantheon and culture that and made them into really weird versions with Finnish names in that still exist today. So, like, just because you are inspired by something doesn't mean you should be the one to bring it into the TTRPG space.
There's You can have them on your platform if you want to give them a space for them to tell their story.
Hmm.
Interview them,
Hmm.
pay them a lot of money, especially if you're going to make content for profit, as cultural consultants. Don't just pay them as cultural consultants, bring them on as decision makers
Yeah,
in your project. So now it's not just yours, it's theirs. And you get to be part of the happy light that the whole project is taking on without just saying, it me, but them down there. Uh,
yeah,
Uplift people as you do it, or just play the game at home.
yeah,
Don't no, you
exactly.
don't have to record it. You don't have to record it. I think some games like if you're familiar with Coyote and Crow,
Yeah.
is a TTRPG that is very focused on North American indigenous peoples in an alternate universe where the European colonialists never came over. It's brilliant. It's wonderful.
Hmm.
And they, if I recall, at the beginning of the book, they basically talk about how important it is to be respectful with the material. To
Hmm.
that this game is made for people who want to explore their own indigenous heritage, culture, and the pride they feel around that. That doesn't
Hmm.
mean that there's a magical barrier on the book and no one else who people who are not indigenous cannot touch this book. Yes, they
Hmm.
can, and they're encouraged to
Hmm.
play. And thank you for playing and supporting it. It's been very successful financially as well, to my understanding. Uh, the book can have its intention of this is here to give a light and shine on this topic. You're welcome to come bask in that light, but just know that light wasn't necessarily made for you.
Yeah.
Like said Whiteman, you are welcome to come play Thirsty Sword
Hmm.
Lesbian. You are
Hmm.
welcome to love it. You're welcome to say all the wonderful things about it because they deserve those things. But it wasn't made for you and it wasn't made with you in mind. But
Hmm.
we're glad you like it. Please keep on liking it. Play
Hmm.
it. Just don't make content about it, please.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, man. So it's getting better. What do we need to do to have that momentum keep going, you think? To keep up this trend of gender inclusivity, ethnic inclusivity, diversity in TTRPGs or D&D, even in the content creation space?
I I think that there's some things that people can't control, and that's politics. So regardless of where politics in your country or in neighbor countries or around the world are going, I fully believe that stories are vital to who we are as humans, right? We've been telling stories since before we had written down language. We've been having oral storytelling was a way for us to pass our culture down as humans. So this goes way beyond like some politician in some country saying people should be XYZ or people shouldn't be XYZ. Storytelling inherently is powerful in and of itself. And I think that what we should be doing is we should be supporting people who tell diverse stories, and we should be uplifting people who bring change to like the typical stereotypical cishet white man storytelling. And we should just have more content that is sort of that depiction of hmm, that depiction of like a more diverse environment. I think that stories also are really encouraging because when the real world is going to shit, which for some people right now it's going to a lot of shit, storytelling is so much of escapism, which is why I love TTRPGs, that like it you're free of real world problems. Not to say that you shouldn't care about real world problems because real world problems are very real world and they're always going to be there. But I think that like it's empowering to remember that there's all of these people telling these stories. Stories are empowering. It's like one of the first things that you go into when you go attend like a leadership skills forum or something, and they talk to you about what is leadership. And the first thing is they say do storytelling. Stories make a difference. So from stories, we learn how to bring points that people can empathize with, to make points about why we should bring change to society. And through D&D and stories, we learn how could we possibly take down a system. Like our a couple of my TTRPG friends and I are planning to do a Women's History Month game where we're going to basically just make fun of Gary Gygax. This is the first you've heard here. It's probably if this is published in around March, it may have happened, but it's coming.
Brilliant.
And it's basically just us saying "fuck you" to these people, and like this is in its way, it's sort of activism, and it makes you feel good. And if enough people hear that story, if enough people identify with what you're talking about, we can actually like get people to join together and be like, this is fucked up. This might be a way to solve it, in that like I don't know that there's puzzles, there's creative thinking, there's all of this stuff that's built into D&D that applies to real world, where it's problem solving, it's taking down something like capitalism, it's taking down a big bad evil guy. It might be an orange Cheeto, it might not be an orange Cheeto, you know. And I just think that it's not a solution necessarily, but I think that it encourages change, and I think that that's empowering.
I think you're absolutely right. It sort of helps rewire and get that voice a bit more confident, because if
Yeah.
we're role playing that out
Yeah.
and it's well received because we are in a safe space that talked
Mhm.
about our boundaries, that talked about our
Mhm.
values, maybe that empowers us to do what we can within our comfort, within our safety, to affect the real world. It's
Mhm.
one of the things I love talking about when TTRPGs come together. TTRPG community comes together for charity events, for example.
Mhm.
They show up.
Yeah.
They raise a
Mhm.
lot of money for
Mhm.
amazing good causes, because
Mhm.
we're changing fantasy worlds. Let's change the real world. Oops, there goes $500,000 dollars for trans trans life charities in Texas was one year, I think,
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
like this. Really amazing. And when you were saying like we're going to play a game that basically says "fuck you" to Gary Gygax, I got this cute little image in my mind of like, excuse the morbid imagery, but like someone like a skeleton uh, rotating really fast in their grave. But let's put wires and make like renewable energy from that, like double whammy,
Oh my god, yeah.
make people even angrier.
Oh my god, that's such a great imagery. Ah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
make them angrier.
yeah.
And like you were saying, that there are a lot of TTRPGs. We should indeed support other diverse creators. And that reminded me a lot of. Are you familiar with the Polygon article that came out in January? The Hey, by the way, independent tabletop games. Maybe you should get loud because D&D's between versions. By the way,
No, I haven't heard about that.
let me Google foo. There was a bit of a heated discussions about it because it was people took it to understand of like indie games are making noise. They've been making
As they
noise
should be.
for they already have been for years
Yeah, yeah,
successfully. And
yeah.
here comes a writer at Polygon saying, "Well, why don't you write about them?" Well, you're a writer, you should write about them. Especially considering all the press releases we send you. I know I send press releases out when I'm doing
Yeah,
TTRPG events. I'm like,
yeah.
it's time for independent tabletop role playing games to get loud. The dragon is wounded, and it's time to throw yourselves into the breach.
That's
The
that's so such a that's such a view that doesn't really showcase where the industry is at all. Like, that's just silly. Just
the
absolutely
men are
silly.
sleepy. Women, did you have something you wanted to say now? Because we haven't been hearing you earlier. If we wanted to take it to an extreme that we're taking it to, not necessarily the author or the industry,
Mm.
but uh, women and femme identifying and people who identify with womenhood creatives have always been around. Uh,
Mm.
the first 20-sided polyhedral dice was discovered in an ancient Egyptian tomb.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there were women rolling some of those dice. There were women orators in not just the ancient Greek and Roman imagery that we get, that is very Eurocentric, but
Mhm.
in all sorts of cultures around the world as well. They were there and they were involved, but their names got purposefully omitted. This was active decision making
This is
codification of their erasure.
yeah, this is history is written by the victors and then everybody else gets forgotten about. And unlike what Gary Gygax says, women's brains can have fun playing D&D. Like our brains are not built any different to not enjoy D&D. Fuck you, Gary Gygax. Thank you.
Fuck you, Gary Gygax. I hope you have that on a T-shirt somewhere.
Not yet, but
Okay,
we'll be working on that.
please, please, absolutely do. Women creatives have existed since the dawn of time,
Mhm.
and they are here. And I am really glad that the Slovene Trolls podcast is one of those people that are having not just like interesting conversations, but like I appreciate like in-depth research. Here are footnotes. Here's our fact check us, please level of discussion.
Mhm. Mhm.
For those, actually, we didn't talk about at the beginning. For those that weren't really familiar with your podcast, if it's the first time they're hearing about you, what sort of topics do you come up? What sort of amazing titles have you come up with your episodes that I was just like screaming about this past week?
So what we kind of do on our podcast is we pick apart topic by topic stuff that usually starts from somewhere in even OD&D, like prior to AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then go through AD&D 2E 3.5, 4E, and sometimes end up in 5E, but one topic at a time. We've done topics like the Drow. We have done topics. Well, we did multiple episodes on the Drow because of uh, the Drow. It's just yeah,
Drow.
it's a matriarchy and it's problematic at that. So we look at kind of like the sexism of it all. We've looked at swan maze, we've looked at lycanthropy, we've looked at nature, nature gods, which are in fact a patriarchy. If you dig deep into it, you will find out that Daddy Sylvanos is at the top, and it is a patriarchy because Daddy is at the top. Um, we have what else have we looked at? We've looked at so much stuff. There's certain sexist dungeon magazine articles that we've looked into where essentially people working at TSR at the time or the writers who wrote in as freelancers or um, wrote these articles about how women should be treated in games, about how they should be their girlfriends and how they should cater to their husbands and understand that their husbands are just playing in the basement and they can't be naggy. They should go shopping and do all of this stuff while their gamer boyfriends are playing D&D. And I'm just like, so there's a lot of stuff that we look into if you like well sourced academic supported nuanced takes and verbal essays that take from between 2 to 3 hours. One of our longest was 3 hours episodes. It does come in parts. We try to give it nuance, we try to give it discussion, we try to analyze what's going on, and also where we can give it the benefit of the doubt of like, okay, this person wrote something sexist, but who are they? Where do they come from? Who, in our first episode, who was Gary Gygax? Why did he say these things? Okay, he was a Jehovah's Witness. Okay, he was in this time. Okay, that's an explanation, not an excuse. But we try to understand where everything is coming from and to give it context. Uh so that is, yeah, a lot of different topics. I can't even remember some of the stuff that we've done. It's been 3 years that we've been doing this, but at this point we've done so many things that we just start citing ourselves because we've already done the research some episodes ago, and then we're just like, okay, here's a recap of what you missed in episode 8, and then this is what you missed in episode 26, and then this is what you missed in 30. But yeah, it's a fun time if that's your thing.
Definitely my thing, especially now that the weather. We're recording at the end of February, so you're going to see this in March.
Mhm.
Definitely, Ida's going to be running outdoors more, and it's like I have a fresh feed, so I'm very happy about that. I have a lot
Mhm.
to catch up on.
Yeah.
You were mentioning the we're not just pointing fingers at individuals because of who they are.
Mhm.
I know we're saying cis het white man, but like the hashtag whatever,
Mm.
we can see their environments, the time it was, and like you said,
Yeah.
their explanations but not excuses.
Mhm. And what we see as a theme now that we've been looking at D&D lore for a while is what D&D and early, I'm specifically talking about early D&D. What D&D started off as was it's escapism for a certain kind of player.
Mm, mhm,
It's
I
not
see that.
escapism because if you're anything but that certain kind of player, that's where they hit you with the, oh, but this is not realistic rule. My dude, you're playing a fantasy game and you don't think that women can be strong as men or stronger than men? Where's the
Oh,
fantasy in that? Where is the fucking fantasy? Because then it's just, oh, you have to roll for pregnancy. Oh, you can't like just all of these rules of like realism, air quote realism, that they applied as mechanics to anyone who's not a cishet white man and trying to sell a cishet white man story. And then it's
aka
just
all
like,
those who cried when the television adaptation of Witcher came out.
hmm, yeah,
Oh, those were beautiful tears. They were delicious to drink.
yeah. But that's where like they're like, oh, but this isn't realistic. And I'm like, my dude, neither is you not rolling to get it up in the first place if we're like going into it.
Having my little baby toe in the ocean, that is TTRPG community ecosystem, as Connie Chang put it as well, that it is today, it feels like that's not the majority anymore. At least that's not in the spotlight. That way, very well maybe in maybe people's garages, people's basements, maybe even at some local gaming stores where they're not too plugged into the greater mass ecosystem community.
Mm.
but I feel that's not in the spotlight anymore. And the spotlight is shifting. And I think it is indeed shifting for the better.
Mhm.
Whether it's big companies like Wizards of the Coast, like Paizo, uh, making those changes actively. Pushback due to politics or capitalism otherwise,
Mhm. Mhm.
steps backward, it's still happening.
Mhm.
It's been happening and will continue to happen at the indie level
Mhm.
vehemently.
Mhm.
And I just hope that we get to a day where if I look for TTRPG podcasts, I can see at a glance it's not over. I will know one day it is not just overwhelmingly cis het white men with one viewpoint. I will
Mhm.
know on my Twitch page it's not going to be tables of all cis het white people playing even just one game, but a variety of games.
Mhm.
I think we're getting there.
I think we are, and I like to see that the industry is supporting people from different backgrounds and people of different kinds, and also just telling more diverse stories and playing more indie games, and not just because D&D is not the be all end all of TTRPGs.
It's pretty
Like
good, but it's not the end all.
it's somewhere to start because it's like the big one, but at this point, this is just a personal opinion. I am so sick of WotC and how they sometimes react to things that they're doing and some of the pushback that they get while not really fixing anything. So at this point, I'm just like, I want to play something outside of D&D. I want to play indie TTRPGs. I want to try all the other things because I've been playing D&D for how 5, 6, 7 years, and I'm just like, I've done it before. I've been here. I've done that. What new mechanics can I see from Call of Cthulhu? I mean, that's not that indie, but like all of these smaller creators and bringing their funky stories and their mechanics into, and you can always incorporate that into D&D. Like I know some people take like stuff from Pathfinder, they put it into D&D, and they're like, "Oh, that's a cool mechanic from something else," and then they're like, I could somehow put that in my games of D&D, and that's completely fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just make it more diverse, and it is getting better, which is good. And I am hopeful that it will keep being so, even
I am hopeful
regardless of
too.
politics.
I am hopeful too because yeah, we you and I get to be the heroes, the heroines in our fantasy world, and slowly but surely, I don't know if we're going to immediately change the world, but I know we're changing and making the closed brackets world within our friend circle,
Yeah.
our curated communities,
Mhm.
our specific audiences.
Mhm.
We've changed those worlds.
Yeah.
I'd like to think they're pretty good worlds.
They are pretty good worlds, and they will something will always influence someone to do some kind of a change if you really kind of represent something diverse and put those kinds of stories that aren't really being talked about yet onto the internet or into your uh, games, your home games. Because like I think just spreading that story and making someone think, oh, that's what that's like. Oh, I could be doing that. Oh, that's a problem. And to just see something from a slightly different point of view, I think that's a win in and of itself. Like, okay, we might not be like changing the world by having our home games, but you're changing the people you play with. You're changing
Exactly.
the community that, and it's you start small, and if every single D&D game that, or TTRPG game rather, is doing something small, like think of the impact that we could be doing with all of those people who play D&D, because now there's so many people because of Baldur's Gate 3 and the D&D
Mm-hmm.
movie, and people were talking about D&D being in a golden age, I think it was said at some point.
Oh, that was another rage-inducing Reddit thread conversation
I
in my own
know.
closed circles.
I know.
Oh, but they're there. These cool, interesting stories that highlight underrepresented stories. or just different and weird and cool. Have you heard of? They exist. They've been around. They're not just based in the U.S. They're not just by U.S. based creatives. They've
Hmm.
won international awards.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Eat the Reich?
Yes, I love Eat the Reich. I played it twice, three times now. It's just so amazing. It is the kind of game that I have a gothic horror gothic horror gothic horror interest. So Eat the Reich is right up my alley of just going in and being like kill everyone, murder hobo,
Kill
completely fine.
everyone. For the audience who may not be familiar, Eat the Reich is a game by Rowan Rickendecker, who's a UK-based game producer developer. And the essence of the story is it is World War II. It is occupied Europe. You
Mm,
are vampires, and you are being airdropped in a coffin into the middle occupied France, whatever,
mm-hmm.
and your job is to drink your way to through the Nazis and finish off by killing Hitler by drinking all his blood.
Yep.
It's Suicide Squad, but you're vampires and you're
Mm.
literally killing Nazis.
The beauty of it is that not the Nazis don't even get a personality.
No,
They're just there. They just get described as, oh, there's a person there, and then you go, I will fight him,
yep.
and then you just keep fighting until you get to Hitler, and then you fight Hitler, and then that's the end of the game.
And hopefully you have picked the beautiful buff lady vampire with the muscles. Mm.
I've never seen her being played. The games that I'm in, I played the socialite, the rich. What's her name? Oh
I
my
know the
god.
face you're talking about. I can't, the
Yeah,
name
yeah,
is
yeah,
not
yeah,
going.
yeah. Irina, Irina, Irina,
Irene or Arena, but
Irina. Yeah,
amazing games. Badass chick taking down the world in
yeah,
style
yeah,
and just changing the world for the better,
yeah.
one bloodless Nazi at a time.
Exactly. One murder at a time.
One murder at a time, we can change the world and make it better. I told you we were going to solve a major world problem within our chat.
Yeah, yeah.
We did it. We absolutely did it. Has been a fantastic chat. Thank you so much for lending your perspectives. Thank you for taking the time to have your podcast and have that be a discussion starting point. Thank you for all the care and research and nuance and editing work you put into it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. It feels so weird to be like a podcaster, because you don't necessarily realize how many people listen to your podcast because not everybody like messages you and interacts with you on social media. So we don't actually like know how many listeners we have, but just the fact that somebody likes us enough to like every now and then send us an email and be like, "Oh my gosh, have you seen this? Have you looked into this? Have you why don't you look into matriarchies?" And this is if this comes out in March, that'll be our newest episode. Is we're looking into matriarchies in D&D. And we're trying to prove question mark that they're not as all as bad as the drow, but spoiler alert, they're not great either.
Oh, oh, and I even got to read the backstory, the fiction set stories, and
Mhm.
oh, it's not much better there, even the new versions.
Yeah.
I think I need. I'm still getting. I'm a relatively new listener to your podcast after having
Mhm.
learned about who you are. And I'm like, I need to have Lyssa. I need to chat with Lyssa. So I'm going to be getting to those episodes soon. But thank you for having that conversation
Thank you for
there.
having me. I love being able to get into the EU community of TTRPGs because I feel like our listener base is so US centric that I'm just
Mhm.
like, I want to find my people, the Europeans, and get back to my Finnish roots and not have to have all those time zone differences that are killing my sleep schedule.
That is indeed one of the biggest pushes to like really have this sort of community because as someone who does actual play as well,
Mm.
it's like, oh, I want to play this game. Oh, I have to be up at 2 in the morning. Oh, I want to play that game. Oh, it starts at 4 in the morning because they're in West Coast, North America.
Yeah. And then the best they can do is, oh, we could do it like 11 p.m. or midnight your time. And I'm like, well, if I ever want to play actual plays, I guess I'll stay up.
Not anymore, because here at EUphoria, we are really all about uplifting the TTRP community that is not US based. Yes, we love our friends in the US, and there's amazing talent and content that comes out of there, and we love it, or we have thoughts about it that occupy and live rent free in our heads way too much. That can be a good thing too.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of talent here in Europe and outside the US. There are there are women, there are POC, there are queer people, neurodivergent, disabled people here in other parts of the world who are amazing, talented, creative people creating content and games and facilitating stories that we love telling. So, thank you for supporting us. Thank you for supporting all of them in any venue you like. Thank you for joining us for this TTRP Girls interview. We're going to continue uplifting women and people who identify with womanhood for the rest of this month. We're going to have all women and all femme exclusive casts and tables. And for the rest of the year, we're going to keep on uplifting those European and outside the US communities. And anyone else that wants to have fun, you're welcome to bask in our light as well. But this gets to be for Lyssa. This gets to be for Aida's. This gets to be for, all those other people that might not have English as their primary language. It's for us too. Thank you so much again for joining us. Is there any other social or project we should keep an eye out for?
Uh, well, keep a lookout at the first of every month. We publish an episode of the Slumley Charles podcast. We have a Patreon, where Sade, my co-host, my American co-host, rewrites some of the problematic lore that we find, and then we also have a book club there where we regularly, every few months or so, we try to read like a book from the TTRPG space, and we have some guests come and read it with us. I'm doing actual plays every now and then. I don't know when my next one will be. Hopefully soon. We will post it on socials, and I plug and listen to the Three Black Halflings. Plug
Yes.
and listen to Asians Represent, because I've been really
Yes.
loving their stuff recently. Then there's the Blades of Mayari, which is I think an Indonesian uh, actual play, and then Five GMs in a Trench Coat is also a very diverse actual play that you should be listening to. So plug all those things and play all the diverse games.
Play all the diverse games. Thank you again so much for your time. And hopefully we can see you at a table at Euphoria soon this year.
Hopefully,
Otherwise, my Discords are open.
yes.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Bye.
Bye.